excuse me, with kind of duplicate broadcasts showing up. So anyway, good morning to folks on YouTube as well. Hope everybody is doing well. Let me get my screen sharing going. Excuse me. I have some stuff in my throat this morning or something. Doesn't want to go away. All right. So let's get over to the chats. Let's get my YouTube chat. There we go. All right. Lots of things to negotiate here in the mornings when we're doing this across the board. What's up, Navy Plum? Good morning. Good to see you. Hope you are doing well. All right, let's get to the charts here. I'll get the rest of these tickers opened. I was just trying to get this broadcast thing figured out first. So we'll get our other charts open here from our other trade plans from the last couple of weeks. We did Meta. I think that was last Thursday's live stream. Or was that? No, wait, that was Tuesday. Sorry. Lunar and we got to 3, didn't we, on Tuesday? Yeah, we did have a third. That's right, NVIDIA. And then we've got our last Thursday tickers that we'll still do a couple updates on those. So let me get those stacked up for us. Tesla. Come on, TradingView. There we go. Seems like it's loading a little slow, maybe because I'm running so much stuff all at once here. Apple holding on to support pretty well, actually. All things considered. The market's pulling back quite a bit this morning after fresh tariff threats from the White House. So, as always, a surprise is no surprise. That's right, and Applied Digital is still consolidating. All right, so let's get to it. We'll dig into things here. Let me also get an announcement out. Let's see, copy link. And post that in the main options chat. All right. What's up, Adrian? Good morning. Hope you're doing well over on the YouTube side of things. Okay, so let me get back to the chats here. Let's take a look at what we're looking at. That's redundant, isn't it? Let's take a look at the ES chart and talk a little bit about what we're seeing, what we should be thinking as we head into the trading day today, doing so through the lens of futures, of course. With that being said, we are seeing a pullback here this morning. Again, I think a lot of that is coming from recent proclamations is probably the right word for it from the White House about unilateral tariffs and tariff rates not changing and things of that nature. So, despite the positive news with the talks with China coming out of London here recently, it seems like as things start to try to find their footing, once again, the White House, someone from the White House steps in and says something that kind of upends all of that, and what seems like progress is all of a sudden becoming wishful thinking again. That being said, we probably were due for a little bit of a pullback. We did get up near this 60-68 target. We shot a little bit above, but nothing really breaking above, just some liquidity prints over there above that 60-68 level. But pulling back here to this confluence that looks pretty decent, actually, 200 SMA, NTS bull flag, 59, 80, 75 there right below. So that's going to be an interesting level to watch today, especially, I would say. See if we get some pullbacks near that. If we do, it could be a good spot to try to buy the dip. We are seeing some dip buying happening close to that level as we speak. This hourly candle pushing pretty decently. I think we had some economic news. Let's take a quick look at that. I almost forgot that that was a thing after being gone for so long and just trying to get back up into the swing of things. For some reason, all right, I'm not going to mess with that. For some reason, my trading economics is not showing there we go, clear United States. All right, so we did have, oh golly, here we go, PPI come in this morning. We were looking for consensus, and actual consensus was about a 0.2% producer price index. So PPI month over month and core PPI and jobless claims all out this morning. Jobless claims ticked up a little bit. It looks like the inflation readings there on PPI both came in a little bit lower than the consensus, higher than the last reading, but lower than the consensus. Continuing jobless claims also this morning, coming in a little hot, but nothing crazy. 1956, so 1,956,000 continuing jobless claims, which is a little higher than the 1.91 million that were expected. And core PPI year over year, 3% below the consensus of 3.1. So inflation readings, fairly decent. Unemployment readings, a little hot, but not crazy. Not anything insane. So overall, no real earth-shattering data there. At least not, from my perspective. Of course, I am always capable of being proven wrong. So I didn't see much in there that kind of creates any sort of major shift in a bias or perspective as we look at the market. So I'd say, as always, let's focus on technicals. 59.80.75, 200 SMA here on the hourly for ES. Again, looks like a good area to buy the dip. We could see this retest 60.68 here before too long, as long as that holds. Below that, we've got an interesting confluence here. A lot of times when I find these confluences, I'll also find that there's a pretty decent support and resistance level nearby. Sure enough, there is right here at about 59.53. Excuse me, I don't know what is going on here. Let me get some of this coffee in here. See if that doesn't get the bugs out of the throat. 59.53.25 would certainly be the level I would be looking at for stop losses and cutting anything. If we do lose that, that would definitely lose a good amount of momentum and some decent bullishness that we have below there at 59.53.25 with a 333 SMA trending right up into it here this morning pre-market on the hourly for ES. So overall, again, still looking like a pretty decent buy the dip market. Just be, mindful of when you're buying the dips. Like, you don't want to buy this little tiny dip up here. You want to really focus on these bigger pullbacks, especially as we get overextended. You can see what happened the last time we tested that 200 SMA, NTS bull flag confluence, nice bounce that ultimately did drive us all the way up to kind of the current peak before this pullback. So we're seeing a kind of a similar setup taking place right here again this morning with that 200 SMA. So just make sure that you kind of have things that you use to watch to see how overextended things might be, and wait, be patient, let things pull back to that inflection point where we really do have a good base of buyers and volume to come in and push things back higher and potentially make a new high over this recent peak near 60.68. So, long story short, buy the dip market, especially as long as we're over 59.53.25. I would like to see, again, another test or something coming down close to that 59.80 or even better, 59.53.25. Both of those look like good dip buying levels, but below that, I'd steer clear essentially, or be careful with getting overly bullish or too locked into a bullish bias below 59.53.25. Could see a bigger pullback if we did lose that confluence of support. What's up, Chris? Good morning, brother. How are you? NTB, good morning to you as well. That is the weirdest looking, I think that's a cat that I've ever seen, but I dig it. It's cool. All right. So let's take a look at our existing trade plans, current trade plans that we have on deck and that we're watching. We did Meta on Tuesday's live stream, so just a couple of days ago. This one does look like it's breaking to the downside, to the put entry side of things. Might see a nice back test entry opportunity there at 693.81. But again, I'd be a little bit careful getting too strong on the, it's a cat. Yeah, that cat does look like it's ready to fight. You and Hazard need to have a cage match between NTB and Hazard the cat. I think that would be epic. But Meta, again, like we were talking about here, put entry at 693.81. Let me get my words out correctly. Is looking like an interesting resistance point. The only thing I would say to be mindful of is, again, overall, it looks like a buy the dip market, so don't get caught too early. I could certainly see with some, added confirmation here on the hourly. I mean, we are digging into the buying pressure here on NTS, so that is definitely to be considered. But overall, bearish momentum right now. We're below that key level there at 693.81. So certainly we could see that become a good entry for puts, and I would say scale out heavy at PT1, maybe leave a couple of runners for PT2 and PT3 with that NTS confluence right there. I mean, literally came up and overlapped our put PT1 perfectly there at 682.69. So keep that on watch for a potential buy the dip level. But certainly I think puts are in play on a rejection of 693.81 down to that 682.69 level. So keep that in mind. It's like a scary movie there. Yeah, I could see that being very Ring-like. Also from Tuesday's live stream plans, Lunar. This one also breaking down to the downside below the put entry. Confluence is building up overhead. Let's take a look at it on the hourly. Kind of a similar look to what we just saw in Meta. Digging into the bullishness and the buying pressure of the bull flag there a little bit on NTS. But has some issues overhead for sure there at 1136. So Lunar could be a good one to keep on watch. Does also look like Lunar could be a really good buy the dip opportunity if we get a third test of this 1067 level. So keep that in mind. We saw it double bottom off of that here recently going into last Thursday. So yeah, keep 1067 on watch for potential buy the dip opportunities, but below 1136, I think there's opportunity to play rejections down to that 1067 level at the very least. So short shares, take puts, whatever works for you. What's up, Dobby? Nvidia also breaking to the downside, giving us a back test here pre-market. Smaller time frames here on the 15-minute. We do have a lot of confluence on the bear side of things. Does seem to be struggling a little bit here. We're watching it live at 141.55, so that flipped to resistance, it looks like so far. Bear momentum here on the 15-minute. Let's take a look at the hourly, though. Be careful not to put too much weight into only a single time frame when you're doing your analysis or timing your entries. I like to get a perspective across multiple time frames because those indicators are going to shift around based on the candle data that shifts around as you go through those time frames. But does look to be building some serious resistance there at 141.55. Another nice confluence though at PT1. So all these names really looking like, like they are having, that there's a lot of good support building just below. So, watch for those entry opportunities and look to buy the dip is what I would ultimately say. Nvidia showing this confluence down here. Strong buying pressure on NTS 200 SMA. All right there at 139.79. That's one of the key levels from our Nvidia plan from this past Tuesday. So keep that on watch. Tesla from last Thursday's live stream plan. This one is pulling back quite a bit. It's catching the 200 SMA a little bit before other names are from what I'm seeing here. Let's take a look at the hourly. Overall, looking kind of decent, but also looking like there's really strong resistance overhead there at 334.07. That's going to be a key level for Tesla to try to break if it's going to continue any higher than that. If it stays below that and we get another rejection, it could see a bigger pullback, but this Thursday live stream plan played out beautifully. We did this one pre-market, gave us a little pump up to the put stop loss average down, and then just absolutely cratered from there with the kerfuffle between Elon and the White House. But our PT3 was pretty much your low of the day. I mean, that's where the support really got cleaned up right there going into the after hour session, but just a little liquidity sweep below that got bought up nicely, and then it came and tested. Man, I don't know how to spell kerfuffle, to tell you the truth. I don't even know why I know that word. I feel like an old person when I say that now that I think about it. But nice support there down at PT3 for puts. That plan played out beautifully. Falafel. Plan played out beautifully to the downside. PT3 was the absolute pretty much pinnacle of profitability. Exactly how we want to see our trade plans play out on Tesla. So that one worked out beautifully. Keeping an eye on it, though. It's definitely in the chop range. And strong resistance overhead at 334.07. I certainly wouldn't begrudge anyone from taking puts off that potential double top setup. Lots of confluence there. Chris, you already know what I'm going to point out here. We pushed a little bit over, but what do we run right into? 333 SMA. Golly, I don't know what's going on with my vocal cords this morning. Sorry, give me a sec. There we go. Hopefully that helps. So nice rejection there off the 333. Again, I like 334.07 as a potential rejection entry for puts on Tesla. Apple we did last Thursday. This one is holding on. Excuse me. Sorry, folks. I don't know why my voice isn't warming up this morning. Apple's done a great job, though, of holding this key support down here at 198.77. Even though the market has pulled back pretty decently going into the trading day today, Apple has held strong there at 198.77. That's why it is our put entry, because it's going to be key support before a bigger move to the downside opens, and that key support is holding so far. Let's take a look at this on the hourly. It does have some things coming down overhead here, smaller time frames on the 15-minute. They're at 201.67. Lots of confluence there of resistance. Is breaking to the downside of these trend lines as well. So Apple, it definitely looks like if we got a push to the upside, Apple would be a good short off of 201.67. So go ahead and mark that level. Make sure you set any kind of alerts you might need if you're not actively watching your charts, and be ready to take action on Apple. And then last but not least, before we get into some new trade plan requests this morning, Applied Digital Corporation. This one's just been in straight up consolidation ever since we did that trade plan. So, golly, excuse me, I'm going to try some ice water. Coffee was not doing the trick. So Applied Digital, ultimately, lots of consolidation and a broad range between our put entry and call entry. But 1126 does look like good support. So keep an eye on that. If we see a pullback to that, we could see a nice double bottom move like we saw, and a bounce like we saw back here last Thursday after hours. Big pump off that 1126 level. All right, so let's get to some new ticker requests here this morning. and see if we can't come up with some really solid trade plans for the days ahead. So is Dobam or Dobby or Dobam is IBIT or MU ticker request good news early? Okay, so is IBIT ticker request? Oh, somebody's got audio in here. How did that happen? That's wild. Okay, so let's take a look at IBIT. And then we will get to Chris. I think I saw Chris ask for MU. Yep, we'll take a look at it earlier. Or, sorry, I was reading that. We'll take a look at it as well. Golly, I can't talk or type this morning. 60.92. All right, let's take a look at this. So iShares Bitcoin Trust. Okay. I was going to say the name sounds familiar, but I didn't know what it was off the top of my head. All right, so this is a Bitcoin tracker essentially. Let's take a look at it. Not one that I don't think I've ever analyzed IBIT before. So let's get our bearings real quick, as we always do when we're taking a look at a ticker that we've not analyzed before. Fresh perspective on things here. Interesting dips down there. I won't be surprised if on, let's take a look, see if I'm right. If on the extended hours chart, this, well, that wick didn't really shift as much as I thought it might, but that is a really good daily level. It's not a good weekly level. Whoops, come on. All right, let's get back to the weekly chart, though. I want to start there. I just happened to notice all that support, wondering what that was going to turn into or indicate. Decent level here on the weekly chart. This is an interesting-ish level. It's not a weekly level. Also an interesting one here. This one probably needs more time to prove out as a weekly level there at 50.65. But we'll take a look at that on the 24-hour. Probably well suited for a daily support and resistance level at this point. This is a really interesting level here on our higher time frames. As is this. We also have what is all-time highs right here, so we'll get a chance to talk about fib extensions here this morning with IBIT testing all-time highs there at 63.73. Sorry, I'm just seeing if there's any other levels that I really like on this weekly chart. There is actually. This is also an interesting weekly level. Yeah, all that, the rest of that looks like I don't think we're going to need those levels anytime soon, is the long story short on that. All right, so let's take a look at the 24-hour. Let's see if we can't nail down where these potential levels that we saw on the weekly chart are sitting. This one's definitely sitting a little bit higher. Still not confirmed on the daily. And this, yeah, looks like a good daily level. So not surprised about that. That's exactly what we were expecting to see there. There is something right in this neighborhood. Could be, yeah, right about here. It's a really decent looking daily level as well. Support, support, support. There's some resistance. I like that. Yeah, I think we got something there on the daily worth noting. And not seeing much there, although I thought we might. Same thing up there. Okay, so let's go to the 4 hour. This is one of my favorite time frames for finding support and resistance for what it's worth. I use many time frames, but 4 hour, one of my favorites. I think it's still, considered high time frame, but starts to really break into some of those really high time frame candles where we can get a better sense of where buyers and sellers are stepping in and out of trades. Like that. That's an interesting looking level. This is also an interesting flat top right there at 62.74. Hang on, I'm going to hide these indicators real quick because they're kind of in the way of me seeing what's going on with these candles at the moment. And for what it's worth, or for anybody who is interested, this is really how I like to set my charts up. I do things kind of with a naked, no indicators on the chart, set up, find my support and resistance levels, and then I start adding my indicators back on and looking for my confluences and letting my hard coding work do its job with... I don't need to go down that far. We're for near-term trade plans. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit into the weeds and just realizing it. Old habits die hard. Yeah, there's a level right here. That's interesting. I don't think we're going to need anything much lower than 52.27. All right, so let's fast forward a little bit. Let's go to the hourly. Let's nail down any additional levels that we have not already captured. Let's also see if we can't go ahead and find our trend for our trend-based fib extension that takes us up to that all-time high there at 63.73. I could reasonably see, potentially, that being... hang on, this needs to move down just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, that looks like a solid trend that broke recently, but gives us what we need to put our trend-based fib extensions on here. And let's see, typically we find this lining up with the 0.236. Could be just a little bit higher. Again, these trend-based fib extensions not going to be perfect or is dialed. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Those are just wicks above there, right? So yeah, no real candle closes above. So I do like how that lays out there because I do see another level here just near this weekly level. So not much distance between them. That can happen sometimes. And that looks like... All right, so let's map out these upside fib extension targets because that's what we're going to need for our upside trade plan. Whoops. All right, those all look good. All right, so let's fill in the blanks as we go here on IBIT. Interesting level here. That could wind up being a good entry. Let's see for upside. And let's throw the indicators on. Let's see what we're seeing with those. Where are our confluences? What's NTS telling us? There is a little gap down to fill still from 59.97, so let's mark that. Down to 59.51. God, that's a tiny little gap, but it's there. Nonetheless. And we're at 60.80. Yeah, I think, all right, so the downside trade plan is now kind of showing itself here. Yeah. Yep, there's a good level right here. I would not want us to be back above if we're playing for downside. So that's going to act as a good stop loss average down. There's another gap down here as well. Top of the gap takes us to 58.59, thereabouts. Let's dial this in because that's going to be our first price target. But it's also a gap. Yeah, right there. That's going to wind up being PT1, PT2 on the gap fill. I would scale out heavy at PT2 if we make it that far down. As most know, but for those who might be newer to trading, anytime you see a gap fill on the chart, generally speaking, it's not 100%. There are no guarantees in trading, but generally speaking, we see a reversal in the price action. So on that gap fill at PT2, I would certainly scale out heavy, maybe leave one or two runners if you've got them. But if you're all out at PT2, I don't see anything wrong with that either. And certainly would not want to ignore that huge bounce off this 57.08 level. It's pretty thin on the support and resistance being truly developed there, but I think we're getting greedy if we think that that might not see at least a little bit of a bounce and at least take us back up to PT2 for puts before we may see a rejection and things push lower. So that's the downside trade plan sorted. Upside trade plan, again, little gap overhead to fill here. We do have one of those levels already identified. Bottom of the gap there. Tiny little gaps, but this one's also not a very high dollar ticker, at least not yet. Still trading below the 3-digit range. So the question becomes, where's a good entry? Yeah, and I know this is what I was looking at earlier. I'd want to see it reclaim 61.89 before I get too bullish on IBIT, just based off the charts. I would certainly want to see this, what was a gap level, hold. Let me just make sure about that. Yeah, otherwise we're kind of skewing our risk reward not in the right direction. 61.30, I'd want to see that hold with a potential push up to this recent flat top, triple top at 62.74. Second price target, I think we'd be crazy not to, let me just pull that down so it's actually tapping that wick. We'd be crazy not to use the current all-time highs on this as a PT2, and then PT3 could see a blue sky breakout up to 65.17, our first fib extension there at the 38.2. All right, so that's our trade plan sorted. Let's put this into the trade plan pilot. 61.89, 62.74, 63.71, and 65.17. Stop loss average at 61.30 to the downside, 59.51. Targets at 58.58, 57.84, and 57.08 with a stop loss average down at 60.26. No shared stop loss average down on this one. All right, let's this out of my way, get this out of my way, pull all these together so we can work with them easily. Oh, I know why. Because this is a smaller dollar ticker. We don't need a Y offset of 1.55. And so I need to figure out why that's started doing that in TradingView. It's like I can't manually input these offsets, which used to work just fine. Quirks of TradingView continuing to improve their platform, I'm sure. I love TradingView. There are no negatives I really have to say about it. Some things I'd like to see them add or improve, but nothing where I'm like, man, they're really doing a bad job of that. All right, so here's our trade plan. Let's get this posted. Not image, I want the link. Here is our iBit live stream plan. And let's get this posted over in the Elite chat as well. That's where we're going to pull our link for pushing the bot alerts to the chat. Let's get that locked in. Boom, like that. Let's get this locked into our indicator templates. Thursday live stream plan 1. And let's get those alerts set real quick. We'll give this one a week to play out till close of business. All right, that all looks good. So let's just run through this one last time, and then we'll get to some more ticker requests and questions. We are looking, what are we looking for here on iBit? We are looking for a break over 61.89. That should give us targets at 62.74, 63.71, and 65.17, with a stop loss average down at 61.30. To the downside, we're looking for a break below 59.51. That should give us targets at 58.58, 57.84, and 57.08, with a stop loss average down at 60.26. Decent risk reward on these setups to the upside and downside, so just wait for something to confirm and be ready to take action. Let's go. All right, back to the chats. IoT, we got a lot of people asking about IoT, Tesla levels, Tesla cost, CRWV. Okay, so Chris, lots of people on this IoT bandwagon. Let's take a look at it. The Internet of Things, I believe that stands for, but that's not the company name, right? The company name is something else. I know I've looked at this before, but it's been a long time since then. Big pullback on that recent earnings report, but does look like it's building a base. Samsara. That doesn't sound familiar. But I know I've looked at this because IoT is Internet of Things, right? Yeah. Internet connected sensor systems, plug and play. All right, we're a few days out from that earnings report, so that's a good thing. We don't have to worry about the 3-day rule at this point. I do have levels on this chart. I just gotta oh, yeah. This is the last time we looked at it. I knew we had looked at this before. How long ago was that? Could have been back here. Looks like most likely. So back in June of last year was probably the last time I've looked at IoT. But let's clean this up real quick. Bear with me. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. Horizontal lines, perfect. I want all those together in one big happy family. But none of those levels are going to be useful to us. Just wanted to clean up that chart real quick. All right, so let's get our bearings for what we're seeing up in this new range that IoT has established. Definitely interesting support that it's found here at 39.28. Really interesting support, actually. Another interesting weekly level there. Support, support, support. There's that resistance I was looking for. Let's take a look at some of these upper levels. We could be butting up against a pretty key level here. Or no, that's about where we closed yesterday. We're below that right now. Yeah, there's the level right there at yesterday's close that it did not recapture. So we could see this pullback continue down to 39.28, but 39.28 looks like a pretty decent buy the dip level for what it's worth. If you want to mark that on your charts, keep it on watch. Definitely have a weekly level there and here. Interesting rejection there, but well, there might be something there, but it's not a weekly level. We'll check that on another time frame. I'll wait to look at the daily chart to call where that level might be. And this looks like a historical weekly level that I did way back in, again, probably June of last year. It may have shifted a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, I could certainly make a case for it being right about there at 31.57. Okay, let's get to the daily chart. Keep this rig rolling. Oh, I'm just realizing how much time I spent on that IBIT plan. My apologies. All right, let me try to go faster here. I might talk less so I can just focus and nail these levels down real fast. And let's see where I thought there was probably going to be a daily level at 48.45. Not looking as good as I thought it would on the daily, to be perfectly honest with you all and with myself. Yeah, it's a little bit higher, or where I think this level is sitting. It's probably right about, come on, there we go, right about there. At 49 flat, psychological as well, with a round number. This is an interesting level also. On the daily, all right, I think we're probably pretty well covered on higher time frames. I know I said the 4 hours my favorite, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip it. Normally I go through a few more time frames, but in the interest of trying to get as much in as possible during these live streams, I want to expand this real quick. I think there is something right there at 40.19. Gap back here. Although the bottom of this gap, and the gap is filled, so the bottom of this gap looks like the more interesting level to me. The top of that gap looks a little iffy, for lack of a better word. All right, 49.51. Big flat top up here at 47.76. We'll want to keep an eye on that. Is that wick meaningful at all off that earnings report? A lot of times, we'll see. Yeah, there is a really interesting level right there at 50.48. Okay, let's see where that lands us as far as this chart setup goes. This is also an interesting rounded top there. But is that all that it is? Is there anything else that helps us confirm that? Not that I'm seeing. So this one's a little bit all over the place. Is it? It's not terribly low volume. I was kind of wondering if it was like a super low volume ticker with the way some of these candles are moving. Not as low as I thought it would be. All right. Now that is interesting though. Right here off this little bit of a rounded top. Could need to get one level over that though. All right, let's take a shot at this. I'm thinking of going long over 43.40. I think that's got a shot of testing this weekly level if the market approves and helps some. Could take us up to 45.32. Over that, I could certainly see the next test being the next weekly resistance overhead. This intraday double top going into that earnings report at 48.40 is really sticking out to me. Does seem like there's some decent support and resistance there. Can I find a little bit more confirmation? That would be nice. Yeah, I think there's a good level there. We're not just picking that daily double top and blindly throwing it out there. I think 48.40 does look like a good PT3. Stop loss on this plan for the upside, 42.04 and 42.36. Again, now that we can look inside of these weekly candles, I'm going to make a case for it being a little bit lower down here at 42.13. And I think that makes for a good stop loss average down for that upside trade plan. Downside, clearly, we want to wait for this 39.28 to break even bad earnings. I'm not saying they were bad, but a negative earnings reaction, I should say. I don't know the numbers, so I don't know if earnings actually were bad. Getting ahead of myself saying that. But I certainly see a good window, a pretty clear one, in this 39.28 to 40.97 range. PT1, this weekly level again, now that we can take a better look at things, definitely looks like it's a little bit higher. Yeah, right about there at 37.05. I like that as a first price target. Second target certainly could be this next weekly level to the downside. Third target, let's see. Yeah, I was already eyeballing this. Is kind of a smaller move from PT2 to PT3, but that, just is what it is. It's what the chart's telling us. We don't want to just assume that every move is going to be big between these price targets. So I think we've pretty well set ourselves up for success here on this IoT trade plan. So we're looking for a break over 43.40. Targets at 45.32, 46.83, and 47.76 with a stop loss at 42.13. Put entry at 39.28, PT1 at 37.05. 34.42 and 33.03 with a stop loss at 40.97. These are going to be way off again because that didn't. Why did I do that? I know it's not going to work. Habits. It used to work just fine. That looks good. All right. Wait a second, did I have 48.40 or 40? No, we went with that third PT being there. Why did I leave that like that? That looks better. Okay, so let's Add these to our group. Hide those. There we go. That's our trade plan. Good moves to PT1 on both sides, and then things do kind of squeeze and consolidate. Lots of support and resistance levels building up as we get further out from these call and put entry levels. All right, that looks pretty solid. So let's copy this link. Here is our IoT live stream plan. Man, I got to get to moving here. I'm realizing time is just escaping from under me. Everyone, let's get our link. Let's set our alerts. Let's lock in our template. And oops, regular trading hours. Alert. 30 minutes. We'll give it a week. All right, so just talking through this one more time real quick. We're looking for a break above 43.40 here on IoT for targets at 45.32, 46.83, and 47.76 with a stop loss average down at 42.13. To the downside, we're looking for a break below 39.28 with targets at 37.05, 34.42, and 33.03 with a stop loss average down at 40.97. Those are your IoT upside and downside trade plans. All right, let me take a look at some of these questions. See if I can give some quick insights, even though I don't have time to do full trade plans for these other ones. I thought I saw a couple of people asked about Tesla. We did talk about this earlier. Tesla's, in fact, I'll just repost this for you guys. These are the key levels to watch on Tesla, in my opinion. Watch for rejections there at 334.07. But I'll go ahead and post this again in the chat for those that were asking about Tesla. I thought I saw another one. Amazon. Yeah, I had a couple of people ask about Amazon, so let's take a quick look at Amazon. Trade plan pilots just in the way right now. Amazon catching really good buying pressure here on NTS. Really nice bounce here pre-market. Looks like it's a notable level to watch. Actually, it could be a little bit higher as far as support and resistance, established support and resistance goes, but very close. So as long as Tesla, as long as Amazon's holding this 211.34, I like it for a buy the dip opportunity. I would certainly, with the 333 curling down there, I certainly would want to see it hold this 200 SMA here on the hourly around 209.23. So, you know, as long as we're holding 211, I say take a shot at buying the dip on this. Stop loss around, call it 209. So 211, 209. Targets going to be very close to, yeah, I'd say my target would be about 215. So decent risk reward there if you're buying the dip off of 211, 215, or if you bought the dip kind of going out of the gates this morning and are shooting for 215, as long as 211 holds, I'd use that 211 as my stop loss. So quick take on Amazon. We are 5 minutes out from market open. I have very little time left to get this SPY plan together and posted for everybody. So let me get moving on that. I will get that posted in the elite chat here shortly, or hopefully within the next 5 minutes. I'm gonna have to really pull something out of my something. So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. We will be back next Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to come back, bring your friends. Everybody can benefit from these live streams. I try to get to as much as possible, so my apologies if I didn't get to your questions or your ticker requests. I am looking at doing a weekend session here, probably on a Sunday before the end of June, so I'll make sure some kind of announcement gets posted and calendars and all that get posted for that. So that'll really kind of open things up and give us more time so we're not constrained by just pre-market time constraints essentially. So with that being said, as we always say here on the FOMO live stream, plan your trades, trade your plans. Remember, we're aiming for profits, not perfection. So keep those wins big and keep those losses small. Go out there and get some green. Have a fantastic day. I will see you all in the chats, and I will be back next Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m. Navy Plum. I appreciate the vote of confidence for the Sunday stream session. So yeah, I'm going to try to get that put together. I'm kind of looking at the last weekend of June right now is what I'm thinking. So keep your eyes on the calendar and updates for that. I do want to do something where we can spend a little bit more time together and not be so rushed. So thank you all again. I will be back Tuesday. Until then, take care. I will talk to you soon.